So, welcome everyone to Oddities and Curiosities. My name's Amelia. This is Dan Martin. And I was just wanting to give a few kind of opening remarks before we dig into curious and odd things. When I reflect on the title of this workshop, Oddities and Curiosities, I think that it could easily be descriptive of many of us at this conference, myself included. The kind of translations that I do, I work on Namtar, Naigs, so I come across a lot of oddities and curiosities in my translations work, colloquialisms, dialect, all sorts of different things. And so for me personally, I feel that it's really important to have an understanding of the lived experience behind the language. It's very important. And also to collaborate with native speakers, especially in the particular work that I do. I work on texts that are related to Northeast India, Arunachal Pradesh, and Tibetan communities. And their dialect is very interesting and different. And so I often come across strange, curious words. And so I'll be sharing one or two of those that I found in a text that I'm currently translating. I think Dan and I both agreed we didn't want to spend a lot of time talking about the theory of oddity. So I think just the framing remarks that I wanted to make here as translators, what are the strategies that we have? The metaphor I think of is we're wandering along a translation path that might have a few little bumps and twists, and then suddenly there's a big rock in the road. And I said to Dan earlier, what do you do when there's a big rock in the road? And you said, everybody gets out of the car and tries to move it. And so that's how I see what we're doing here. Everyone gets out and gives it a push or tries to do something. So I feel that it's really important as part of translator training to learn about these rocks in the road and what do we do with them. I teach Colloquial Tibetan at Naropa University, and once my students get to a level of confidence and ability, I especially give them a wide array of different texts to translate, and I intentionally give them texts that have mistakes, that have spelling mistakes, that have grammar mistakes, and have strange words. Because I think it's really important to learn how to navigate this, and I know for myself it helps me improve as a translator. I also love puzzles and riddles and detective stories, so that's also part of why this particular topic, oddities and curiosities, appeals to me so much. So I really look forward to hearing about your own oddities and a fruitful discussion in how we treat this in our own translations. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview about how the session is going to unfold, and then I'll move over to Dan. So Dan's going to give some presentations on different kinds of oddities, scriptural, spelling oddities, word oddities. And there's some of the people that signed up for this session had already sent us some oddities that they'd found. So we're going to have a look at those and discuss those. And then after that, maybe just open it up for spontaneous oddities and curiosities that we might want to discover. So having said that, I really welcome you all. And Dan, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Amelia. You hear me well. Well, looking out on the audience, this is pretty much what I see. I see a lot of these. So I thought we'd start with the biggest oddity of all, which is the translator, her or himself, the people who are supposed to know two languages and be able to speak through both of them. That's how I understand that image. So I hope anyways you'll appreciate the oddity of the situation that me and Amelia are in today, sitting more or less in front and beside. We're trying not to be too frontal here. Yeah, and But it's a very odd situation to be. It's a little bit like the Tibetan saying of trying to teach the alphabet to a Buddha. But with all the Buddhas in the audience, I'm imagining that you'll display a great deal of patience with our errors and mistakes. And we have to feel a little bit free here about making mistakes and accept that we may say something that will turn out to be wrong. And because we've all done that, we've all said things that were wrong. So I think we'll be okay. I think we should just get down to work. So as she said, I've divided them into the oddities into three categories, and we're going to trade off a little bit as the thing proceeds. But we'll start with what I call the script oddities. These categories are strangely overlapping, and sometimes you're not sure which classification to put it in, but so don't be too worried about that. Script oddities, maybe one of the oddest things for many people are the problems of the cursive script. Not everyone learns cursive script. There's a good reason why I believe people should learn cursive script, because there is a certain amount of spillover. Even if you're reading canonical texts and things like that, there are certain things that you'll encounter that may be spilling over from the past of the text, which may have very well been in the cursive script. Even if you're not reading cursive script, there are effects that the cursive past of the text can have. And that results in some oddities that may cause you problems. I haven't actually seen very many practical examples of things like this, but among the most dramatic ones. But usually these things are only in particular contexts, like in kavya verses where you only use the letter I and no other vowel. The only vowel you use in this verse is the letter I. So you get a pile up of the vowel I. That kind of explains that. Usually, if you do find these things, it's in a context of prayers that are known by the people who are using the text anyways. So you might think this is impossible to figure out, but actually it's not. I can't figure any of these out, but I can see how you could. And there are in fact some examples of cursive oddities that I've been totally unable to solve. Here's an example I give you right away. I imagine I could think what this should be. This is from a Pumpo text from the Pun Canon. And you see below the green, there are some two letters. I guess I'll give you a close-up of that so that you can see it better. I think I know what the second syllable is, but I'll save it. I'll save some suspense for later. But what's that first letter there? It sort of looks like a nya or something, but I'm not too sure about it. The second syllable looks like a backwards N. But here's an interesting thing. From the context, you can know what it should be, because it's actually a context of a lineage. It's say te rimpar. I guess I wrote it out for you on the next slide. Here you can see. And that thing is where the X is in the transcription. I'm not giving it away by telling you the solution. But if you see the context of it, you see that something's being gradually transmitted up to blank now. And some of you may already know the answer. But actually, this is a strange thing, but I have an answer for why it happened, which is a little unusual. I think I can tell you why they do this. It still remains an oddity, regardless of all that. But you see down here, in practically every sadhana text, there's this kind of a mantra that ends with aham, which in Sanskrit means I, right? But you don't write the initial A of it. This ends with the O, and according to Sanskrit Sandhi rules, you have to elide, get rid of the initial A of the next word. And this sign stands for the omission, the elision of that A in aham. And aham means I, and what do you know? This sign up there, it stands for dak, and dak means I. And so when you see that in a cursive text, you can just read it as doc. So did that make sense? I think it did. It's called avagraha in Sanskrit. And of course the Tibetan form of the avagraha looks different, and it doesn't always look the same. There's usually a little extra thing at the bottom, but it varies in just what that little extra thing looks like. Otherwise it looks sort of like a nya or the number 3 or something like that. So I feel good that I can give an explanation for that one. But then, of course, when you see something like this, I don't have an actual example of it. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the text where I had encountered it. But I have seen it a number of times. Here are two strange syllables. The first one, we know already, means dock. But the second one, which we saw before, I didn't try to explain it, but it really is a backwards na. Why is it backwards, and why is it na? I sort of...
It stands in for may.
Yeah, exactly. But I found an explanation for that just recently in a essay written by a Tibetan on Ume script. I was reading it on the plane on the way here because I was sure that he had something to say about it. And yes, it does stand for may, but why is that? Because in Sanskrit, the na is a negation. But why is it backwards if it's a... And I decided that the reason it's backwards is because it marks it off as something unusual. Otherwise, you'll read it as simply na, and it won't make sense. But since it's reversed, you know it's something weird, and you have to do something with it. And I don't know if that made sense exactly. You can make up a linguistic rule with different steps why it would end up looking like this rather than forward na. But why the na also? Why? And in fact, it stands for the Tibetan negation, may. You can't read it as na, you have to read it as may. That's the trick. And I think here, right in the center of the thing, you can see another example. I should stand up and try to point it out. Right in the center, you see there are 2 syllables that are quite strange. They sort of resemble the strange syllables I showed before. I've shown this example to a lot of people, and I've never had anyone explain it to me, tell me what it says. And I'm not ready to tell you what it says today either. I'm really not. It's I've collected more examples of these unreadable things. I try to find the most unreadable things, and I believe this one is maybe one of the best examples. And here I just made a circle around it so you can see it more clearly. You know that it's Taiyang Le Dang blank blank Pe Le Chi Che Chang. So there's something that makes sense in there, that would make sense in that context, and that will probably solve the problem. So if you're familiar with literature about karma, and there's some particular kind of karma that you would talk about saying karma and this particular kind of karma, then you probably have the solution. I don't know what that solution is, but I thought maybe you could work your minds on it and come up with some idea. And my next thing is quite strange also. I was puzzled by this for years, and in preparing the slideshow, I decided what it must mean. This is from a pun scripture also, from the very same volume that the other thing was from. And there's an oddity there also, the dung tok. You see the dung tok in the second line. That's the word for the yiko, for the this thing that comes at the beginning of every Tibetan page. It has different names. Pompos call it the dung tok, and so what it's saying there is the second line. When you in writing the dung tok, then blank. What is there? What does it have, or what is there? What does it have? I guess. And it dawned on me, I mean, you cannot have a Y subscript on a Y. It's totally impossible, right? It is. It's totally impossible, but there it is. So here's my explanation anyways. you do have these abbreviations for kusung tuk. And actually the yata, the Y subscript, should stand for the ga that comes after, but sometimes it stands for the ga that comes before the root letter. So sung, it works with sung and it works with tuk, to just put the yata and forget the rest and make an abbreviation that way. So, of course, the fourth thing in a series, if you have a fourth thing in this series, is yunten. So that Y with the yata, I'm fairly certain, must mean yunten. If we look back at the passage, then you can see that it says when you're going to erect a scriptural volume, what benefit would it have if you were to write the down talk? That's more or less what it says there. So the yunten does make sense in the context, and now I'm totally convinced that that's the solution to that problem. So, huh? Yeah, I was wondering, maybe there's a abbreviation for Trinley also, but I've never seen it.
Just pass it around.
Yeah, it's true that everyone who wants to talk should have a microphone. It's for the recording purposes. Yeah.
I'd like to hear this part.
Yeah. So let's go on to some spelling oddities. One of my favorite spelling oddities, one of them that stumped me for quite a while when I first encountered it in the works of Lama Shang, in a really bad manuscript of Lama Shang. But anyways, it's this. It's spelled like that, and it looks just like that. And it's not in Ume, it's in Uchen. Well, I just gave you the solution, because otherwise I guess we would get nowhere. It's another spelling for this, something you probably do recognize. But I just gave an example here of its actual usage in the Shije collection. I'm going to talk about the Shije collection in just a moment, because a lot of my coming examples that are coming up are based in the Shije collection, which is a manuscript that I do date to around 1245. And so you can expect some archaic features in it, actually, and it does have some. You can see here that it has the final da, and it has the dadrak that's supposed to be characteristic of Old Tibetan texts, although it obviously continued to be used later on. This is a good example of that. And you see another good example here of another phenomenon I want to talk about, but I'm not sure I'll talk about it yet. Anyways, you can see from this example that it's used in a very natural way, as if that is the correct spelling, and it's not, however, 100% consistent in that manuscript that it's always spelled this way. It could be spelled the other way as well. So, well, here's the cover of the Shije manuscript, which is a wonderful thing to try to read. You absolutely cannot read it. So you have to reconstitute the title. They attempted to reconstitute the title in the original publication of the work by Barbara Aziz and another person way back then. And here's their reconstituted title page based on what they thought it said there on the cover. But there are things there that simply must be fixed because they're wrong readings, even though I'm unable to look at I can justify my corrected readings here from other evidence within the manuscript itself. And I believe that these corrections that I have given are the right ones. So here you go. Here's one of when I first picked up the Aziz volumes way back in around the late 70s, early 80s, I guess it was very soon after it was published, then I opened it up and I was so excited. Here's like the words of Padampa Sangye, and if I could only read these, it would be so wonderful. I thought I was a little proud of the little bit of Tibetan that I had learned over my first 5 or 6 years of Tibetan studies, but I couldn't make heads or tails out of it. It was really discouraging, and I just put the book back on the shelf, and I don't believe I ever looked at it again for at least another 10 years. But meanwhile, I read some other kinds of Kagyu texts and things like that, and some of I think some of the unusual vocabulary items started to make sense to me. What's this example? Oh yeah, well here's the key. Actually, when I was looking at the pages and nothing was making sense, the reason is because I didn't understand this, what's here on this slide, which is that very often the sa superscript is used for both the ga and da prescript. So instead of the G and the D being there in front of the root letter, you get the S above the root letter. And there's so many cases where that actually creates a spelling that you think should belong to some other word with a quite different meaning. I think there's an example here. I don't know. Oh yeah, gompa. What is that? If you can't, in your mind, change that S superscript into a D prefix, you'll never make sense out of this, will you? And this, I gave this on purpose as an example because I think you can see from the context that what I'm telling you is correct. That S superscript really is a D prescript letter. That's what it is, and that's how you have to read it. And these things also are not totally consistent within the text. You can find gompa spelled with a D. And I think I have more examples here. I chose another clear example because this nyugma, it must not be the word for bamboo or something like that. Of a pen, nyugu, right? It simply has to have the meaning of nyugma, of the original Tengilhen Chikye, it's the primordial, innate something or another. We need a bigger context to really make sense out of it, but you must read it as nyukma with the ga. And then there's the ne instead of ne, which is also very puzzling, makes sense out of that syllable with the S, and nyempo with the S when it has to be nyempo with the ga. There are so many examples, and every page has some of these. It's not just here and there. You'll find them everywhere, and that's why I absolutely could not understand the text when I first got to it. So now I'm going to pass things over to Amelia, because we're going to move into word oddities, and she's got a few of those to offer.
I have two, I think. Well, there's more in the text. Are you...
Oh, yeah.
Can you move to the... I just thought I'd show you a picture of the place that I'm talking about. This is an area in Arunachal Pradesh. It's called Menchuka now, but its original name was Bechak Shingri. And this is just one spelling that I found. I found about 5 different spellings, mostly with the chuck. The chuck changes into iron, or it can mean to break, or I've looked at a few different texts and found it spelled differently. So that's one oddity. The text that I have is chapters 3 through 7 of a larger text, of which I don't know where it comes from. So I'm trying to track that down. Dan's given me about 5 leads already that are very helpful. So could you go to the next? This is the title page. So the copy that I have was copied down by the local lama of his personal text, which he said was copied down from another text that came from Tibet a long time ago. That's the provenance that I have. So I've been attempting to try and translate this text, and it's rife with misspellings, grammatical errors, and very odd words. Do you give me the next slide? So I just thought I'd put 2 of them out there. This is from a part of the text. It's a conversation between Yeshi Sogyal and Padmasambhava, and Yeshi Sogyal is asking about all the different qualities of this special land, and it starts talking about this land of forests and honey, and then it starts describing the different kind of bountiful fruits that are available in this land. And you can see it starts with, there's Chang and Mar and Zen, which is a local word for Tsampa. And then you get to chung is spelt wrong. After that line, you see this word huntig la sokpa. And so there are these different things that are compared to 7 fruits that are just like butter, are just like beer, are just like tsampa. And then I come to huntig and biti, and I don't know what they are. And I have some ideas that perhaps the huntig might relate to some kind of Tibetan medical term or some kind of plant. But these are also possibly colloquialisms that I will have to try and find somebody who still knows what they are. But I was just wanting to open it up and see if anyone had come across any of these words and had any idea of what you think they might be. And please speak into the microphone.
Here's a clue. Both of them must be fruits.
Well, they must be something edible, I think. But then it goes further down. If you go further down, it starts talking about different minerals. So you have musi, which I think is sulfur, and then you have iron, copper, and then you have another one, which I don't know also, which I think is a misspelling. But yeah, this is a difficult thing to do as a translator, is what do I do with these?
That's interesting. You have the nyukpa, the ba and the nyukma down there.
Yeah.
The 5th line.
Yeah.
The same nyuk like I had example.
Yeah.
But ba means a kind of a cane.
Yeah, in this case, it's all the different kinds of, there's cane and bamboo and also all of these things. Yeah, and there's cane and bamboo and...
Some kind of cane, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, cane, bamboo trees, all different varieties will grow. Oh yeah, the oti, I think is a kind of fungus. Oti, I think, because it's got, there's mushrooms of different varieties, and then I think that oti is some kind of fungus. That's what I looked through, but for the hunti, I found a term hun lan that's a particular kind of medicine that's a liver tonic in a Tibetan medical dictionary.
So
but
a drop of that.
Maybe it's a drop of that, yeah, a tig,
line,
yeah, or a line, yeah. I'm not really sure. So,
I don't think it's fruit.
You don't think it's fruit? Could you speak into the microphone so we can hear you?
Yeah, it's hard to
I
get that.
have no idea, but I don't think it's fruit.
Well, so this was, when I was asked to do this panel, I thought, I hope I can find something that stumps all of them. But now I'm realizing maybe that wasn't such a good idea.
The Lombard Shinto.
Yeah.
The Totobia Mamboyo, I think substitute food is, there's a lot of things that can be substitute food.
Yeah.
So next one, Shatanyambe Shinto Dun.
Yeah, meat, yeah.
The fruits that equal to meat.
Equal to meat, yes. There are the fruits that are equal to those, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Fruit that equal with Tsamba.
Yes.
Then Martanyam, Chantanyam.
Yeah.
Now we got a
Huntig, yeah.
and Biti. So that I think equivalence they're talking about. Substitute, Nyamba.
Yeah, the Nyampa is also spelled incorrectly here. But what are they equal to? I mean, what is it? What is that? What are those?
I think the fruit that can be substituted with meat. Instead meat, you can take that fruit.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Instead chan, you can take that fruit.
Yeah.
Instead barley, you can take chan.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of honti, you can take that fruit.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I'm wondering what hunti is.
Yes, I think I have no idea. Honti and biti. I don't think it's Tibetan either in the pronunciation and the look that.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe some sort of maybe Hindi or Indian language, Himalayan language. Like that. Yes.
So in answer to your question, there's it's Guru Rinpoche is explaining to Yeshe Sogyal all of the things that are available in this land, and it's you can take refuge there. There's treasures that are hidden there, and it describes all the different doorways that you can enter into this place, and all of the treasures that are buried there are. There's all sorts of kingly regalia, but there's also seeds, and there's all these different plants that are there available, so you don't need to take anything. And so all of the descriptions of the trees and the flowers, they all have these different qualities. When I get to this point, from here, and there's a couple more pages on, it starts referring to things that I just can't find. A lot of the other things that I started in the previous pages, I found were names of plants or were names of medicinal materials and minerals. But this page here just has me completely stumped with what these particular two words, and what do I do with them? Do you want to go?
I mean, I don't know the provenance of this text, but could BD be like a cigarette? Like
BD. It's entirely possible. I mean, who knows what has been added in later on into this text, because I don't know the provenance. It's entirely possible. Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, if you think about it, it's almost like, don't bring anything because we have everything you need there, right? Exactly. So what are the requisites for human existence? What do you need? Yeah. You need tsampa, you need meat, you need butter, and you need beaties. I mean, you need... right? I mean, you need...
You skipped the beer.
Then the question is, what else do you need? I mean, sometimes to ask those types of questions, to think about the context, what the text is calling for, in a sense. So I think beaties are really good.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. It might be. I mean, because this text is, it's a text that is the property of the local lama, and he copied it down, who probably copied it down from somebody else. It's entirely possible that they've put those things in there and added some, because I don't think that, some of the colloquialisms that are in this text are very particular to this region. So I can't imagine Guru Rinpoche speaking like an Arunachali. So it's obviously there's been some dialect that's been put in, so it's entirely... Yeah, it's really feasible. Did you have a...
Yes, I think it's in the...
Can you pass the... Sorry, I can't hear you, please. Yeah. Just turn it on.
On. Turn it on. There's a little switch here.
Test.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. In the Nida Kajra, there's a beating.
Uh-huh.
Ting like a bowl of bee.
Ah.
Which whatever
bee is, yeah.
So
So
I
a
can
bowl
email you
that would be great.
passage.
Yeah.
I just recognized it
Uh-huh.
from that text, but I'm not sure what it means there either.
Yeah.
But ting could be, so there's all these things, the sampa and so forth,
Yeah.
and a bowl of
A bowl of bee.
bee.
Yeah. So far I've got a bowl of bee and a biddy. I was wondering if the tea had some relation to water or some kind of special kind of drink. But take us for huntig, yeah? No?
I don't know. I'm sort of reading the sentence that the BT is connected with. It's as if it's saying that there's a group of substances, including BT, that would
With the
be
la
good
sopa.
substitutes for butter.
Because that's what, if the first kind of etc. occurs.
Yeah,
there.
la
Mhm.
sopa instead
Yeah.
of just the sok.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So there are these fruits that could serve as butter
Yeah.
substitutes, and they would include this BT.
Right.
But this,
In that case, it is a fruit.
The next line is just matches, right?
yeah, musi is matches, yeah. So we thought, you need,
To go with beating.
yeah, you got the lighter and you got the matches and the BD. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But then in between there, you have the tsema, which is peas. So that's a sort of strange thing to have BD and then peas and then matches.
Depends what the huntik is.
So this is for me, an example of, there's a rock in the road and what do? I just get people to try and kind of give me ideas. In terms of translating this text, I have a lot of footnotes that explain why I don't know what they are. I have to say, I've asked people that are familiar with the local dialect, and they don't know what they are either. So maybe
I'm
I've
really in trouble.
I'm in trouble. I'm really in trouble. So this was just a really quick example of just odd words, and I was trying to find the most difficult ones to try and test these amazing brains of Tibetan translation that we have in the room. We have a few other examples that people have submitted. So
No, I'm still going on.
oh, you're still going on. Okay, so Dan's going to have.
When do I have to stop?
So you're going to share some more odd words.
Yeah, I have lots of them.
And then we have a few different examples that people submitted, and if they're here, we'd like to invite them to introduce it and talk about
But
them.
we're stopping in 45 minutes, right?
At 6:30 is the time, so we have an hour.
Oh, we have a whole hour.
We have a whole hour.
Okay, plenty of time.
Yeah. Okay.
Plenty of time for more fun.
Okay.
I'm going to start with what looks like a food term, but actually it's not. This is an interesting word because it's a word that survives into the late 12th century works of certain Kagyu authors such as Shangyu Drakpa and Jigten Gompo. They both use this word. And it's also used in the Shije collection that I'm dating, as I said, to around 1245 as a manuscript. Although the contents, of course, would go back much further. It's actually a word that's been discussed by Hugh Richardson because it occurs in Old Tibetan texts, so there's a certain continuity there. It's become obsolete, basically, as far as I know. I've asked about it. I've tried to determine if people would use this word nowadays, and I think they don't. Do you think they do? I'm looking at you. Shosha, this shosha. It may be used.
I think so. Live by shosha.
But it actually means food in that case, right?
Payment.
Oh, payment. Okay, that's one of the meanings that it ends up having in any case.
Shosha must don't reduce the salary payment.
Yeah.
In the Jew.
Yeah, that is one of the usages of the word. But actually, in those early Kagyu works, it usually has a sense of some kind of mental or athletic strength, not the meaning you just said, but some kind of strength. And that's also the way it's used in the Shije collection in general. In the Old Tibetan context that Richardson discusses, he calls it just sustenance. He believes that it's a combination of the word for meat and yogurt together, sho for yogurt and sha for meat, and therefore it means some kind of sustenance. And yeah, it's also used for revenues from agricultural estates and things like that. And nowadays it's used a lot in medicine, in medical terms, because there's a whole class of herbs that are especially good for different liver complaints and heart complaints, and every single bodily organ has a shosha that's associated with it. So I understand those herbs to be a strong kind of sustenance for those particular organs. So there are a lot of interesting uses of the word. Anyways, Dorji Wangchuk, I had a discussion with him about this word, and he believes it's truly obsolete. He doesn't think anyone would use it nowadays. But then he's from Eastern Bhutan. What does he know? And I searched the old Tibetan Documents Online website, which is a very useful thing a lot of the times, and it got 14 results. So it was used quite a lot in Old Tibetan times. And this example that I'm giving here is, for me, a very interesting one because it also has a typical expression that Padampa like to use a lot. It ends with the word kiyin. It's a dog. and I actually wanted to translate it sometime like, that's a load of crap. Something a little like that, because, we have to understand dog as being something really quite despicable, and that may not be obvious to modern readers either, because dogs have different associations for many people nowadays. So how would you translate this? I think what it's really saying is like in times when there's a performance of kind of athletic sorts of events, maybe pao chepa, how do you take that, like maybe even military kinds of something or another, then if you're not decisive, if you're not very decisive, then gyeki shosha, then the strength of the athlete is just a load of crap. So does that sound right? I'm sort of guessing in several points. Huh?
Subject is missing, whoever it is.
Yeah. When you do the what?
Warrior.
Oh, when you're acting as a warrior. Yeah.
If you can do the gomacha, useful, not useful. If you are not useful when you do warrior, gel is the strong man.
Yeah.
The strong man's salary is a dog.
Salary or sustenance, though? That's maybe the.
So during times of war, if the warrior is not useful, then is taken as a
The
dog.
strong man's payment or whatever you pay is a dog.
But how can you know whether it's that or sustenance? Like he's eating very, very heavy, protein-rich food, and that's what makes him so strong, right? That's the sense I want to squeeze out of it, that he's an athlete, he's very strong. Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know. Anyways, it's not terribly important. Just that shosha is an interesting example of a word that's kind of has a very long history and keeps changing its meaning, actually. And the next example is basically saying, what is it saying, that next one? Gyula, shosha, masri. The si I take to mean to constrict something, like to constrict it to something very, like reduce it down, yeah. So don't reduce down the shosha in your mental continuum, if I can say for you, maybe, something like that. So what that shosha is also, is just another nice example from the Shije collection of that word, which looks a little odd. But let's move on, unless there's more to say. Taram is a word that entertained me a lot, and I was thinking about it a lot because it's used in some very interesting contexts, especially in Pumpo texts. And the meaning that it has in these Pumpo texts is known outside of Pumpo texts, but one place where it's not known is in the dictionaries. All the dictionaries known to me do not know the meaning that it has in those texts. I mean, they do have the meanings that I list there. It's a bad thing, it's a filling, it's a binding rope maybe, it's an herb, a particular kind of herb. Maybe you can explain the two syllables of the thing with the ta and the rum, but as a herb. And then the fifth meaning is only in a German dictionary, and I don't really put much credit in that number 5, so I left it for last. Well, you can already see, I guess, what my solution is to its meaning. From this context, I don't think I even need to tell you what taram means in that context, because if you understand the context, you understand what that word means. It's the solid blue taram of negativities. Lost is the miraculous key to open it. And this is from the opening of one of the most important Pumpo Dzogchen scriptures. And it immediately presents you with a word that you're not familiar with probably, and that you can't find in the dictionaries. But there's an obvious solution. It means a lock. But that's a funny thing too, because I found that the word tarum maybe, slightly different. Tarum is used in the Dharma language. That's the D-A-R-M-A language, the Dharma language, which is a language spoken just across the border from Tibet, just across the border from furthermost western Nepal. There's a small language that I'm very interested in because it has very clear connections with the Shangshung language. I mean, that's the main reason I'm interested in it. But in that language, the word tarum means key. It doesn't mean lock, it means key. And why is that? There's actually a linguistic principle to explain it that's well known among people who are involved in Tibeto-Burman studies. I myself am not, but I like to keep track of what the Tibeto-Burmanists are doing. And one phenomenon they speak about a lot is called by the embarrassing term genital flip-flop. Which means if you have a name of a genital in one Tibeto-Burman language, you move to the next and it actually refers to the opposite sort of genital, which is actually a phenomenon that's even known in the U.S. in some dialects. I don't want to use the actual word, but it's been used in connection with President Trump anyways. So, but it's actually the case that sometimes this word can apply to either one, depending on which part of the United States you grew up in. So I don't know if I have to be too embarrassed about it. And there's some more examples in Tibeto-Burman languages where you have the word for bow and the word for arrow, and those also get crossed. So I think there's some way to account for this that makes it seem a little less odd. So anyways, I don't want to give you all my wonderful examples, but here's something about with the taram. Another nice example from the Shije collection. I wanted to give a non-Pumpo example because sometimes people dismiss Pumpo examples, and that's a mistake because actually many times in the Pumpo text they're using words that were very common in the pre-Mongol period that passed out of usage by other people. Pumpo still today they know what the word taram means. They really do. So there's another example where I think it's quite obvious from a completely different source. So let's look at a whole bunch of other ones. These are some of the odd words that popped up in the Shije collection, and I don't know if I have to explain all these words, but to me one of the most curious words in this list is this one right here, because it has two syllables that you think are backwards. And when you see it, it doesn't make any sense to you, unless you realize that the word marme for butter lamp or butter fire, literally, can actually in this text be switched around, and you can say fire butter instead. And of course, when you translate it, it's just going to come out as butter lamp anyways. But still, even after you know what it means, it remains curious because I haven't really seen that it happens in other places, in other kinds of manuscripts and so forth. So these are all wonderful examples of strange things. I think the pepa is a leech. It's just that you don't often see names for the leech, but there it is. It's very clear from the context that they're talking about a leech. And this peta is a kind of a woodworm. It lives inside the wood and it eats up the wood. I don't really know any more about this creature. I haven't been able to examine a real one in nature, although I'm familiar with that type of worm in America. I've seen them many times. I just don't know the botanical classification of what one would have been intended. So I don't know if you're curious about any of these other things. The first one is just that this takril is a name for a type of snail. I don't know which botanical type of snail it is, but I'm pretty sure it's a snail. The second one, this pade, I don't have the slightest idea what it means, but I have at least 5 examples of it where it's very clear that it is a word. It's not a ba ending on another word. The ba is the first syllable of a 2-syllable word. It really is. I know it from the context of the different sentences where it occurs. I just don't know what it means. So if you can help me with that. And the third one, that be pom, is also something I don't have the least idea about. So there's so many wonderful word oddities. I'm never going to get to the end of them. This is one of my favorite because it has a history that you can more or less trace. And it's also something that's very common in Pumpo texts. It's the most common place to see it. And it's also something that occurs in Old Tibetan texts, which is always interesting to see that Pumpo texts have something that's really Old Tibetan. But this spelling that I give right here, I hesitate to pronounce it because I don't know how that second syllable would have actually been pronounced in those days. But you can see that somebody's pronunciation influenced what it turned into in the middle period when you find this spelling tang shell, the middle one, and the modern ten shell is what it ends up as. But you see the movement from this one to that one to that one. It's quite clear, although I believe the meaning changes a little bit along the way. And also you find strangely different spellings at every period of the same word. So there are a lot of complications you can get into, but really that's an odd term. It means the male and female. The tongue means the male and the second syllable means the female, and together they mean a couple. And that's abundantly clear. Each word has its own independent existence. And there are probably also terms that you wouldn't immediately recognize as someone who knows classical Tibetan. They'll probably seem strange to you. But for Pompos, they're very ordinary, and for Old Tibetan texts, it's quite common. But I just wanted to point out here, this term is, if anything, more rare. It has exactly the same meaning, and I imagine that it may have referred to the male and the female. I don't actually know that, but it does mean a couple, and it's only used in Nyingma Tantras. And it's something still more weird and odd and unusual to look at there. So let's see. Here's an example of some bigger kind of concept that's maybe more interesting to some of you, because it's a very important term for certain Pumpo Dzogchen texts, but also for certain Pumpo logic texts. It can be used in a Dzogchen context and in a logic text. And Anne Klein, who is here, can tell you much more about it. The reference is here, but this whole book is all around that, centered around this term, the Tiglen Nyakchik. Karme translates as single circle. There's a single occurrence of it in my Shije collection that I know of. And Pamo Drupa has a sutra citation text where he cites a passage that has this word, which to me is the most astounding thing. I've looked in this Dagmepa Jipa. It is a sutra that's in the canon, but this word's not there, so he must be referring to some earlier version of the translation of that text that was not preserved in the canonical version I was looking at. I have to say that there may be existing somewhere in some version off somewhere. So let's leave that behind and look at this. And I think you need to contemplate it for a moment. I can't just it looks Sanskritic, doesn't, just because it has the H subscript. There's the answer. I haven't seen it a lot of times. Sometimes people make the mistake of thinking that Drigong Penzen was a Drigongpa. He was not. It's no doubt a name based on where he was from, not which sect he belonged to. I know many people have fallen into that mistake, but all of his connections that are known are actually Sakya teachers. So he was a Sakya who is criticizing the Nyingma, especially the Great Perfection teachings. And it's known that his anti-Nyingma circular came out in around the year 1400, which was a time of a lot of polemic, really. I won't say with the rise of the Gelugpa school, maybe that does have something to do with it, but between the Sakyas and the Gelugpas, there was a lot of bitter debating going on. What was my point? Oh, wait a minute, it doesn't come to my mind at the moment, but there's one Sakya teacher that was his teacher. So for that reason, I'm saying he's a Sakya, and that the Drigung doesn't mean anything. It's just his place name. He's best known for a collection of Yamantaka texts that are sometimes exist as a group. So he's known for something else besides the polemic. Yeah. Speak with the mic. Shout. Push it up. Yeah. Okay. Louder. It may be dead.
Try this one.
Trigung Pelsen. That's the Indian Pelsen, the Sridhara. That's he's very important lineage.
He is not.
This isn't the
He's
same.
Not that Sridhara.
It's not
he's
that.
Named after that Sridhara.
No, the Indian. He's the Tibetan
No, but this
Sridhara.
is the Tibetan.
Oh, yeah.
The Tibetan.
He's a major figure in the Vajrabhairava lineages.
But that's why he has that name, because
Right.
he also is associated with his own cycle of those teachings. So,
Right.
So there's not a contradiction in there, is it?
No. I was just
Because there are often people who are namesakes of important people in their own earlier lineage, and that causes a lot of confusion sometimes.
right. I don't have it memorized, but I have I've got all that laid out. He's a major holder of the Vajrabhairava lineages, and he's often in the histories and so forth. He's referred to as the Tibetan Sridhara,
Okay,
right?
so
To avoid the confusion, because Sridhara is also the Indian Sridhara is also major lineage holder of the Vajrabhairava.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
anyway, I was just adding to the identity of this figure. I mean, he's very famous. But
You know
anyway.
he's the Tibetan guy because he's arguing about so many local Tibetan
Right.
issues. Yeah. So this is a very funny word, and it appears in a bunch of different forms. I actually have a Pumpo example. Oh wait, you've read this already. I don't need to read it to you, right? Is this it? Oh yeah, there it is. I just found this last week. It's a modern editor wrote some notes about the kind of editing he did on these Pumpo texts, and so it's like an editorial comment. So it's interesting, many of the other things that he mentions there. The way the word second line, you can see that Bhawa could be spelled with the H subscript, making it look a little bit Sanskrit. So maybe that's relevant also to why the Bhom might be there for Gom, but I'm sure this Bhom is the same as the Bai is the same as the Bem, that all those syllables are really the same syllable, as odd as that may seem. They all mean Gom, we know that. So I think I asked Jean-Luc Achard about this, and he has some experience with the word, and he believes that the Bom and the Bem are really just the same syllable read differently, because the Naro and the Drengbu vowel signs can often be confused, especially in cursive scripts. So, cursive scripts can have an impact on what happens in the non-cursive text. That's an example of it, I believe. So let's switch gears a little bit. I'm sure you're getting very tired, but you're going to get tireder. Here's a word that comes from the Kepadeu history, which is something I've been working on for years now. And this is one of the stumbling blocks, one of the most difficult things that I've come across. And I don't know what to make of it. Actually, it's in a very secular context in the long section about the administration and legal sorts of things in the Kepadeu history, which is difficult to translate in general. But here I don't even have a clue. Besides that, there are 360 of them. There are 360 big toe. That's all I can tell you. I was trying to think of analogous words. Maybe just the second syllable would be in common with this word, and maybe that would shed some light on it. Maybe it's a foreign word. Maybe it's Turkic. Maybe it's Chinese. Maybe something. Any idea? And you can always contact me later if you get a sudden revelation. I'm easily available by email. I'd be very happy to hear anyone's suggestions about what to do with this big toe. I think I can give you the entire context there, so you can see how I've translated the surrounding parts. It's talking about insignia for different levels of officials within the military. And the last part is not a very sure translation either. There's a problem there. It doesn't really make sense, does it? So anyways, I don't know if we want to belabor the big toe. It's probably time to stop.
I just wanted to ask, I mean, is it some kind of military term for a particular, military rank or something? That's
probably. Do you have good reason? Well, because the context, yeah.
Because of the context,
Yeah.
and because you have the leaders. That was just a suggestion that I was thinking. But
the last part is also obscure. You see the 4 leaders of, I stuck that in there, the leaders of the Mon communities, all the way up to the emperor. What does that mean coming right immediately after it either? I'm stumped. The Mon communities would be considered the most lowly and distant outpost for the militaries. They would not like to serve there. These are probably places where people are going around with bows and arrows and shooting all the Tibetan soldiers they find.
Yeah.
So that's what I think. They're definitely southerners in the southern slopes of the Himalayas somewhere.
My region.
Although it's actually a Chinese word, isn't it? In origin, the Mon refers to southerners in China. Tibetans also use the word for their southerners, I think. I think that's what happened.
Yeah, what's also really interesting is how the Tibetan communities there refer to the indigenous people who live in the area as well. There's all sorts of interesting things about that too. But do you want to move on to some of the things that people submitted?
I think we should.
I think we probably should.
35 minutes left.
Who's up?
I have to jump ahead. I have to find a way to get out of this thing.
Who are we putting on the spot?
Exit show. Okay, that should work. Yeah, I'll just go down a bit and skip all these other things. I had a wonderful example of a Z with the R subscript. I should have gotten to, but anyways, we'll move up to this part. Come on, open up. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not responding, I believe. Yeah, there we go. So we're just going to go through them in the order that they've been submitted. Some of the people who submitted them are here, and they have the complete right to present their own words in their own way. So if Yael Bento would like to present her unusual thing. Everything's actually there on the slide. We don't even need to read it out loud. But this is something that she found in a work of Rendawa, and it's a cursive text, entirely cursive text. And for some weird reason, the dal is used as a way of writing kinkor. And it's not the mandala, as you might expect. It's the kinkor, the mandala, with the final A in English. I have to use the English term mandala here. And that's what it means, that kind of mandala. And it's been seen in other Sakya contexts, at least, according to Yael, who doesn't want to speak for herself. And here's we just took out another example from the Ume text. This is it. You can see it's the mandala that is to be drawn. That's how to read the first bit of that line. So that's really the only bit that you need to read, I think. And then there's a there's another sample of the usage of it in that second thing there, which is the mandala, which is to be visualized or contemplated in some way. So we don't need to translate the whole thing. I think it probably makes sense to you. There's an attempted translation there at the bottom. Oh, sorry. There's an attempted translation at the bottom of the slide, so I don't think we need to go into that more, do we? Is that? No. And there's some nice examples of strange abbreviations in the rest of the text. I just wanted to show this one because it uses the for to replace part of the word shin. Rang shin is how you read the first part. And it says rang shin gine. And that is truly unusual. Using the for is not unusual. That's very common, to replace part of the word. But to take the grammatical ending of one word and to collapse it together with a following noun is extremely unusual. I would say very, very odd. So, anyways, that was beside the point what submitted. Here's another submission from Christian Luxanitz. If you want to jump in and say something about anything, just grab the mic or shout for the mic. This is submitted by Christian from... Oh, sorry. This is submitted by Christian Luxanitz from London. He's teaching art in London these days, I think. And he has this project going, and the name of it is there. And this is from the very last folio of the Mustang Conjure, which he says is probably 14th century. Actually, the reading of the colophon is quite crucial to know if it is 14th century, in fact. So he's, of course, very concerned to be able to read the colophon completely. But his colophon is interesting for a couple of reasons. There's something especially difficult there that's pointed to by the arrow. I think I'll just give you a moment to reflect on it a bit. It's using that word tongue shell that we had before that means a couple. And that is really essential to reading the first bit. Had time yet? There's some old Tibetan spelling and orthographical or writing kind of conventions that are used here, including the tsek that always comes before the she. That doesn't follow modern ideas about what you should do. And the shok at the very end, what should happen is that one of the two she's should be absorbed into the right-hand side of the letter ga, and you'll only have one she there that's visible. That's what should happen, but here you even have the tsek, which is very odd. It's an old thing, for sure. And it reminds you of certain early Prajnaparamita manuscripts, in fact. And you find a couple of old Tibetan things like the Chen Drang Ne and the end of the second line. It says Chen Drang Ne, and the S is written next to the P instead of the S on top of the P. That's something that seems quite early. And there's a Dadrak in there also, in case that means anything. So... But does anyone have any idea how to interpret the second line? The first line, let me give it a try. Depet Sundru Dempe Yundak. So that's the patrons who have a very, I don't know, translating Sundru. They have a very energetic enthusiasm. They're enthusiastically faithful or something. And they're a couple. So there's a man and his wife who have sponsored this volume. So that much I think we can know. But let's go on to the next. Yeah, finally, there's actually a verb that says that they erected this volume, this precious volume of the sutras. It's actually a collection of sutras inside the volume. So that part makes perfect sense. And then the very last part of it, you see there's a misspelling in the very last line. Do you see it? It looks like gom pang. Maybe pang means a lap. Maybe gom means a step. So it means a step lap. It's a misspelling. For something, what? I want to get another answer. I don't want to give all the answers. Okay, we just won't know. We'll go on. We don't need to figure out this thing by. It's gompang, like the rank or the level of may the. What it's saying is may the patron and the priest, the yuncha, I guess, patron and priest, attain the level of unsurpassed, supreme bodhi. But just a bad misspelling. Because that's misspelled, you might also think that there's something misspelled in the part that doesn't make sense. That's a way of learning to be suspicious about the text, right? If it misspells one thing, it's likely to misspell another. I think your text is a good example. So, okay, tell us your solution. Oh. Okay, Christian's going to be very disappointed if we don't have a solution. So next, I guess we'll just move to the next, and the next is submitted by Brian Cuevas, who is sitting just there, and maybe he'd like to say something. I hate to just read what's there on the slide.
Yeah, I put everything up there that I think needs to be said. Dan and I have exchanged emails about a year ago about this. This Rajan appears, as I say up there, in these series of numbers, usually the big numbers, 1,000, 10,000, and so forth. And if you go to the, I've got some examples from the text here.
Should I show them?
Yeah, show the. So what you have are lists of offerings. This is from the Ralo Namtar. So these are offerings that are presented to Ralo whenever he's traveling. And so Rajan is here. It's not, of course, you might think of it as something with horns. And, maybe he was given something with horns. But as you can see here, you have a long list of offerings. But Rajan is actually qualifying the number here in all of these examples. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what it means. Basically,
was there any place in? How many times was it used in the text?
This occurs about 32 times in the text, and
it's always used with the numbers, or
it's always used with the number. It's usually, and actually, it's dong or tri. It has to qualify the quantity here. I also gave an example from Kuntun's history of the Yamantaka Tantras, which was published was written in 1628. He has one example here. You see at the bottom where you have a gathering of, 10,000 monks, Rajan. Dan and I were, Dan had, you had found this phrase in the Shije literature, but then it wasn't used the same way. Thankfully for the THL, or TBRC, we've been able to do, searches and so forth, and we found a number of examples of this being used, also with the 1,000 and 10,000 numbers. I just take it to mean something. Actually, Steve, you had sent me an email. Do you have your mic? Can someone give Steve the mic? I can't remember. You found a Sanskrit expression for this, yes?
Still not working? It's working. Looked to see what the Sanskrit of Ra might be, and it was Shringa, I believe. And then I just looked at Monier Williams, and most of the meanings were horn, but there are also meanings tip or peak. And so I thought Rajan might be doing a kind of hack Sanskrit version, might be something like having the full part or the peak of whatever it's modifying. And so I just made that suggestion to Brian. No, the full measure.
Yeah, full measure.
Because it's the peak, the tip of the horn somehow, or it's a peak or a tip, meaning the utmost or highest, something like that. And so that maybe it means the full measure of whatever it's modifying.
Yeah,
Just a guess.
And that's the way I kind of thought of it, in the sense of maybe more colloquially in English, as a kind of a solid number, the solid 10,000, solid 1,000, something like this. 10,000 even or something. But then you have in the first example, pakme, But anyway, I was just curious if anyone had ever seen this expression. No.
Besides,
Gannon.
besides they're useless.
I don't know. Can I offer my wildest guess? It's maybe a riwa, raki, ri, and wa. That's used with a number, so kind of terms boom to riwa and wort, boom, wort, to be wort. Yeah, wort. Yeah, boom riwa. That's there. The usage there. Maybe, yes, something like that. That my word is. I think I'd never seen this before, so.
And then Dan suggested you found some rule in which the wazor can represent a naro, right? But that wouldn't make much sense.
My reasoning is it's something that comes after a full number. So in modern Tibetan, maybe something like the tampa that tells you that that's the complete number.
Right.
I was thinking it's a kind of thing like that would be used especially with numbers. And being something especially used with numbers, maybe, just maybe, it would follow the rule that happens with numbers, like the number chonga and the number choge,
Right.
where they actually get a naro instead of a shabshu. But the naro can also be represented just as the wa subscript without the naro. So to reverse that, it could be possible to read the ra with the wa subscript as representing ro, and maybe at some point it actually would have been pronounced as ro, and then I found this passage that tells you about that funny way of spelling the numbers, where the naro becomes a wazor. So he actually. I wanted to look for more examples outside of numbers, that actually, since this Nordrong organ, he gives only the numbers as examples, and then he says la sopa kind of thing. But what he says is that the wa subscript is used as a substitute for the naro. So, taking that very literally, then I can read this as simply being ra, naro, ro, and not the ro that means corpse, or the ro that means taste, but the rodit means left over, that there's something remaining. And then, this is another small jump, but it's still a jump, that there's more than that number. Just they don't want to say exactly how much more. So there's some remaining over that high number.
I see. Yeah, that makes good. That's that's
It's a laborious explanation that may not therefore be
1,000 plus. We would say 1,000 plus, 10,000 plus.
remaining,
Yeah, yeah.
So does that,
But it does seem it's very interesting. If you go on the TBRC and search it out, I think the only other context in which you are other literature is a certain Kagyu text that I see it in, if I remember correctly.
sometimes it's really used with boom. That's something I notice.
What?
Even higher number of boom. Sometimes 100,000 is there. But, well, okay. We still have at least one more to present, and Jose is here, so I guess he will talk about his own.
So this is a sutra, the Dharmaskanda Sutra. One of the Ranjun Yeshe groups was doing this for the 84,000, and it's now completed. So I think it should be up on the website. But not knowing that they were also doing it, I worked on it because it has interesting stuff on Pandikas. So maybe we don't have time to look at, but the whole context is it starts off talking about what a Dharma Skanda is and how many of them there are, and the Buddha teaching the 84,000 Dharma Skandas and so forth. But then all of a sudden it just the sutra veers off and starts talking about Pandikas and Shandas, the archetypal non-normative sexual types in this literature, to use as an example for something that came earlier. That is in itself is a little bit obscure, but the part that I was hoping to look at was when it says in the third line, at the very end, it says Sharipu ditate pena sama maningni debe dechag pangba mayin la deba la tembayang mayino. So that line is clear, I think. Shariputra, it's like this ditate. For example, samas, shandas, and manings, pandikas, debe deja pangbang mayinte, have not gotten rid of their desires, right? Debe dechak, the desire of sexual desire is probably meaning here specifically. Kamaraga or something like that, or Pambai. Remember, this is a translation of a Sanskrit text, right? So they haven't done that. They haven't pangba it, mayin la, deba la tembayang mayino, but neither can they engage in sex, right? Deba la temba. Deba is a euphemism for sex, right? To engage in desire, to rely on desire. Then it continues, Sharipu dedagi bume dugutonne. So these two types of beings, bume dugutonne, when they see a beautiful woman, dojagi sem kiepe, they generate, again, to talk about with their generator experience, right? They generate or they experience a mind of desire. In other words, they experience desire, right? Dojagi sem kiebe, sama maning nam le pelcher, the majority of those who are, from among those who are samas and manings, Chimban negi tabargyur, they become afflicted with the disease of their jimba. And the question here is what jimba means. So jimba means normally the calf of the leg that is below the knee and above the ankle. But I want it to mean something else here, but it's not yielding to this other reading. So I'm hoping that someone else can help out. So jimba, then it continues, jimba zagbar, let me just finish and then we can talk. Jimba zagbar gyur, their jimbas begin to leak, right? Or to drip. Their drip. Jimba karwa tabur gyur, their jimbas become, and then here's another not obvious word, karwa. Karwa can mean it's the material, the metal that's made that, for example, bells are made out of. But it can also be a translation for a Sanskrit danda, like stick. Karwa tabur gyur. Shin marbur gyur, their faces become red. There's actual evidence from other texts that that there were eunuchs in the court who wore red makeup on their face in ancient India. Sharipu di jingyam dusim. So what do you think, Shariputra? Saman maning kayim badela magal. So this is again difficult. Maning kayim badela magal, without their falling, without someone falling. I think this is from Paul's edition of IBS edition, which is Lhasa. But I think the other edition, the Derge, I think has Sala Magel, without them falling to the ground or something. Anyway, here it says Manin Kanyem Badela Magyal De Lela Töngi Matabar, with this here le is almost certainly wrong. I think it's lu. De lula töngi mataba, without taking a weapon to their bodies, which I take to mean even when they're not made eunuchs. It is, you have munnings and you have pandakas and shandas who are naturally this way, even without being castrated. So even when they're not castrated, I think this is what this says. Matabar chichir deda jimba nebar gyur. Why is it that their jimbas are that they have problems with their jimbas, that they are afflicted with some kind of disease, that their calves are afflicted with some kind of disease. Now that's literally what it seems to be saying, but any ideas are welcome.
The quote continues on the next slide. I don't know if you want to move
The
ahead.
Kolwa, yeah. Then it says, Chumne de Tsadra Sharipu.
You want to move ahead to the next?
I think we did. I see.
No, there's
Yeah, then it goes on to say that they. Look at the top of the next line. At the top line. Sama maning ni tumu kor sualate. So these shandas and pandakas, they protect the retinue, that is the harem, of the queen, right? Deda bume dugu tonne doja kisem kelaso. So does this mean that they're completely trustworthy, that when they see a woman they don't experience desire? No, it doesn't mean this. When they see a beautiful woman, they experience desire. Deda doja gisemgi, and as a result of that desire, nyomomba kolwar gyurte, their afflictions, right? Their kleshas, kolwargyur, boil up or get riled up, right? Nyomomba kolwa dedagi lu kuchu gepar gyurwe. So nyomomba kolwa dedagi lu. So through the boiling up of their emotions, dedagi lu, their bodies, in their bodies, kuchu gepar gyur, their semen right? I think that's what Kuchu probably means here. Increases. Dedagi doja dungwe, and being afflicted by desire as a result of their semen increase from their experience of desire. Dungwana jimba shindu gebar gyurlate. Their jimbas then, what's the word? Geba means to like break up or to fracture. What is it?
Oh, crack.
Crack. They crack. Yeah, their jimbas crack. They're
split or something.
I just can't believe it's calves here that they're talking about.
Could it be could it be a vein or some kind of part, like intricate part of the body, like the urethra or something? I don't know. Could it be?
Yeah, in I think when I looked at this passage originally, I thought that maybe jimba, if it has an ao, right? If it's ao bayata chakigujina chin, then it translates things like, I can tell you, some Sanskrit words like nisarana or nishkasa, which means orifice or egress or gate. Which, in that case, I think it would make sense to translate this as ducts. And in the medical literature, there is this theory that Shandas have this blockage of the ducts, which makes them unable to procreate. But for that to be a plausible reading, it would have to be one would have to amend every single instance of bayata chacha giguchina chin to ao bayata chacha giguchina chin. I don't know whether that's, but I mean.
Maybe an essential thing to know in order to judge the thing. I mean, in a strictly anatomical way, if they've actually been castrated, they may not have any of those parts that you're talking about.
Yeah, but here it says
be missing.
But the text says
jimba,
even when they haven't been castrated. So, but you're right. If they're in the palace, if they're in the harem, then they should be castrated,
eunuchs,
right?
Yeah.
But these orifices that are talked about in the medical literature are not external orifice. They're internal channels, ducts within the body that
But
get
still
plugged up.
In the same general area, though, right?
It's not clear that it's in the same general area. Yeah.
So yeah, it makes me wonder where they thought that semen was in the body, because this is completely from completely anecdotal, but I have heard Tibetans, particularly monks, explain where semen is in the body, and they say it's everywhere, right? There's not really the concept of what comes from the prostate and what comes from the testicles, right?
Yeah.
So can you say more about that? Where's semen in the body?
Yeah, I don't know what the Tibetan medical tradition says, and even the Indian medical tradition, I'm not sure. I mean, there are meditations when you visualize semen as being congealed on top of the head and it's supposed to drip down, but in the medical tradition, I don't know.
Can you go back to the first slide?
Yes.
First slide.
Here's a crazy idea. Maybe it's the place where whatever it was extracted from them, like some related verbs to jin that may be more like chung. I mean, I think that's actually the verb that's used when you castrate someone. Yeah, that's the verb that's actually used for castrating, isn't it?
To excise.
So it wouldn't have anything to do with this jimpa. No, okay.
I would talk to a Tibetan doctor and see if that term is a familiar term. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
is see if that's a particular medical term.
I would look in all the fat new medical dictionaries that have come out, if you have them all. Most people don't. There are too many.
I mean, have you looked into the extant Sanskrit Vinaya texts? Because it seems as though there must be some discussion of Pandikas.
I have. I've looked up most of the references to Pandikas and Shandas in the Vinaya.
But this word doesn't.
This is unique. I haven't seen anything like this.
What about non-Buddhist texts?
I mean, the medical texts, the Indian medical texts I've looked at, the Indian juridical texts I've looked at, but they don't mention something like this. Like, according to Narada, one of the legal texts, it talks about if you want to marry off your daughter or your ward to a real man, the type of man who is capable of producing children, it gives characteristics of what these men are like. And one is that produces noisy sound when they urinate. So I mean, some things like this, and the fact that their feces fall within the water rather than float. These are characteristics. And then it does talk about men who are incapable of reproducing, but there's nothing like this. There's nothing like this in that literature. For what? And how would one apply that here? Oh, it's the name of a channel. Oh, I see. Yeah, I guess one would have to look and see if in the medical literature there was something like this. I mean, that's the implication, right? The implication is that these eunuchs, that they're safe in the harem because they can't impregnate women, and that is, in the end, what matters most to the king, right? That his paternity be unquestionable, right? So they're safe from that point of view, but then the text is asking, does this mean that these men are completely without desire? And the text says no, they still have desire because when they see a beautiful woman, their passions increase and their semen increases, and then their jimpas begin to leak.
Because they go the wrong way.
Right, because it goes the wrong way. Yeah, right.
So it's not that they're not, and so they're saying, even though they haven't been castrated.
Right. Right. Yeah.
You don't think that the jimpa might have something to do with jimpatangi, that kind of jimpa?
I thought about that.
Something. I mean, I
the spelling is
I had to
different.
mention that with a gao.
Yeah.
It's usually spelled with a gao, chagi, go.
Yeah.
China, jin, jimpa, jimpa.
Yeah. Okay.
That was just an intuitive response, but so it's 6:30. We didn't
Exactly time.
move.
We should quit.
We moved a few rocks. So thank you. It's been such a pleasure to hear from Jose and Brian and Yael, who also submitted something, and Dan. It's always a pleasure to listen to you and learn from you and find out all sorts of oddities and curiosities. So thank you very much, and thank you for everyone for coming.
Thank you, everyone. Yes. And the Dropbox is still open in case you want to stick something in it. The other people in the group will probably still get it.
If you come across something where you think, oh, I suddenly found it, then please, the Dropbox or email us. we can move more rocks together.
Yeah, the story isn't finished. There's still more.
Thank you guys.